Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, everyone. My name is Nate, and welcome back to another weather forecast discussion, this time for August 25th, 2023. Now, we haven't done this in a while, so if you want a reasoning as to why, it's all in the comments down below, but we have some activity that is starting to rise, including what could potentially be a tropical system starting to try to develop here into the Gulf of Mexico, and that has been designated as Invest 93L. We also have Tropical Storm Franklin to talk about, and I'm going to kind of avoid these other disturbances here for reasons of it basically not hitting anyone. So if it's out to sea, I mean, it's mainly just impacting fish that are out there. So don't worry too much about that. So let's take what we know and run with it. There is Tropical Storm Franklin. We're going to be talking about that first. And then this right here, this whole mess of thunderstorms in general, this is what we're going to want to watch out for and talk about later on into the video. But first, we're going to, of course, head off over to Franklin. And before we get into like the nitty gritty, we're going to want to show you guys what the National Hurricane Center says of this. Here is the cone of uncertainty. It takes it very close to Bermuda here once we get towards the Monday night into Tuesday morning hours. So definitely something to watch out for. And the other thing to make a note of is that this thing as of right now is actually moving east at about 5 miles per hour. And it'll take about, I would say, a few hours, probably a good 12 to 24 hours before this thing finally starts to turn back north and it actually starts to accelerate and intensify as it continues to move north. So something to note for Bermuda, something to note for the coastline. This doesn't seem to really be all too impactful besides rip currents. So if you guys are out on the beach this weekend, heading off into the beginning of next week, definitely something to make a note of because, well, rip currents are pretty serious. So if you see any red flags out there on the beach, don't go. Anywhere past knee-high waters could potentially catch you in a rip current. So here is the visible satellite imagery of Franklin, and you can clearly see that this thing is as exposed as it could possibly get. There's some new initiation here of thunderstorms on the eastern side of the eye, but everywhere else there is not really a whole lot of showers and thunderstorms, and that is basically because there's a lot of shear that is pushing it off towards that eastern side. You can see a lot of these clouds that are starting to billow up and then they just immediately fan out from left to right. That is exactly what's happening. A lot of these clouds and these thunderstorms have been pushed off to that eastern side, and that is the reason why it is mostly exposed. Now, this wind shear is anticipated to kind of veer off. We can show you here in general with our wind shear from Tropical Tidbits. You can see there is kind of this upper level trough that's kind of moving through the area, and it is creating quite a bit of wind shear over Franklin at this moment. But the interesting thing about it is that Franklin, with it continuing to exist, has actually weakened the trough to an extent, and it has created a little bit of a window of opportunity for it to try and break through and eventually move off further towards the north. And that is exactly what happens here as we continue to move this along towards Saturday and into Sunday. The trough actually breaks, and we begin to start to see Franklin exhibit some more anticyclonic ventilation, which is healthy for tropical systems to start to intensify further. So something to note. And then we also have a trough over here into portions of the United States. So this is going to basically shunt this thing over and parallel the coastline. So Franklin will go north, and then once it encounters the trough, it'll actually veer off a bit further towards the east. Now, there's something interesting to note here, that the models are also picking up the fact that a lot of this moisture has been pushed off on the eastern side. And so a lot of your thunderstorms are over on the eastern side. That changes once the wind shear starts to kind of deteriorate. You can see as we get closer towards Monday and into Tuesday, we start to see a lot of that moisture surround the center area of low pressure system, and Franklin is then allowed to intensify. And we're anticipating this to be a hurricane, maybe Cat 1 or Cat 2. They're saying Cat 2 as of right now, so we'll just have to see. But Bermuda, you guys are definitely going to want to watch out, especially at the beginning of next week. Now, we're going to take a look at the guidance here from a couple of the models. Here's the GEFS model and where Franklin could potentially go once it passes Bermuda. Because that trough is centered over the mid-Atlantic and the northeast, a lot of that wind shear is actually going to direct Franklin all the way up and around towards the Newfoundland area. So realistically speaking, it's going to be causing a lot of rip current issues along the coastline, but there could be some issues for some of these areas over here in eastern Canada. So Nova Scotia, Newfoundland, definitely something to watch out for once we get towards the mid to late next week. Pretty simple, right, Franklin? Now we move over towards the thing that's not as simple. This right here is Invest 93L. This is anticipated to do something over the next week, a 80% chance of formation over the next 7 days, according to the National Hurricane Center. And this thing is really interesting. The reason being is because over the past few days, I've been watching this thing and it's just been kind of centralized over land. Now you got a portion of it that is over sea, and you can see that this thing is already starting to inhibit a little bit of a just general circulation. It seems to do that a lot, especially with a lot of thunderstorm activity over water, and you can see the general flow. Look at this. You got a lot of these westerlies coming out from the south, a lot of these southerlies coming out from this eastern side, and then you can just see the general swirl continue all the way up until you get over towards the Yucatan Peninsula, to where things kind of get a little bit more murky. So just a general swirl over here over water. And you can see the satellite is also picking up a lot of the surface winds that are saying the exact same thing that we're seeing. We've got a lot of your just general swirl here. It's just nothing is really closed off, and so nothing is really all too significant at the moment. So we're watching for this general swirl to try and get a lot more organized, better defined, as the National Hurricane Center says. And so we're just going to continue to see. But for right now, a lot of showers and thunderstorms over the Yucatan Peninsula and over the areas of Cuba right now. Now, interestingly enough, I talked about how we had a trough that is centralized over the Gulf of Mexico and extended over where Franklin was. And you can see that earlier, you can continue to see where that low pressure system is actually at. It was over portions of Mexico. It is actually going to recede further in towards portions of the southern United States. So for the time being, it actually seems as if nothing really is all too significant. And of course, we're allowed to continue to see if 93L will try to intensify. But here we come again. It comes back. Our upper level trough continues to kind of show signs of it being there, and because of that, this trough is actually going to direct whatever forms out of this, whether it's a weak system or a strong system. It will actually push it off further north and into the general vicinity of the Florida Peninsula and the panhandle of Florida. So just somewhere in that general area, maybe even into portions over near southern Alabama, Mississippi, and southeastern Louisiana. That's kind of the general area to watch as of right now, if there was some form of tropical system that were to try and move. But the other thing to note here is, how far does this upper level low move back into the Gulf of Mexico to steer this thing? Because if it moves a bit further towards the east, then the system ends up being steered a little bit further towards the east. So it's kind of a little bit of mind games, if you will, between the models and what actually could happen. And the other thing that we have to consider is maybe that general area of circulation that we're looking at right now may not even be where the thing forms. Maybe that dies and so it forms somewhere else. That's the weird part about tropical weather. At the beginning of a tropical system, you have to really try and figure out where it specifically can be. But all signs point towards something forming. And by the time we get towards the beginning to the middle of next week, we're talking Tuesday, we're talking Wednesday, we're thinking that this is where the storm could potentially really show signs of it being present and moving off towards the southeastern United States. Now, the reason why I am so dead set on this thing probably forming is because, of course, I mentioned the wind shear is gone, so that's one thing. The other thing is the ocean heat content. This is where a lot of your energy comes from for tropical systems to really form. Tropical systems love warm, moist heat. They don't like dry air. They don't like cold air. They like warm, moist heat. And tropical systems can get that through the ocean waters. Now, the ocean waters, I'm pretty sure everyone knows at this point, it's above average. The temperature, it is boiling down there. It could feel like a hot tub if you step down in the Florida Keys and you step into the water. It is so warm. But what also happens is because the waters are so warm, it can also extend further down into the water. It could have more depth, if you will. And this points to that. This is how your tropical systems get a lot of your energy to potentially even rapidly intensify. And we got a lot of it. Regardless of where you look, besides maybe the northern portions of the Yucatan Peninsula, you got a lot of ocean heat content centralized over the Caribbean, areas north of Cuba and the Yucatan Peninsula, into the heart of the Gulf of Mexico. And just wherever this tropical system forms, it's going to go over one of these areas. It's likely to happen. We'll show you the ensembles here in a bit. But the fact that there is so much energy here inside the waters leads me to believe that at some point, it's going to take advantage of it, and it's going to intensify further. So just one of those things to where the people over there in the southeast are going to want to continue to monitor this activity as this continues to move about. So what do the models say? Well, this is where things start to get interesting. This is the Euro model, and these are the ensembles. Every single little line is its own little opinion, and models can have multiple of them to kind of form a general consensus. You can see here that it is very widespread in where it thinks it can go. So that's kind of the reason why I'm saying, well, the entirety of the southeastern United States is going to want to watch out. But the other interesting thing here is there is also a trend here with the models. The further west the track is, the stronger it is. And you can see on the top right, those are the pressures. That's the pressure in millibars. And usually the lower the pressure, the stronger the tropical system is. And so you can see some of those oranges that are over towards the portions of western Florida into areas of Mississippi and Alabama. Those are stronger tropical systems. But the further east you go, the more greens you see, which means the weaker the tropical system. So that's the one consistency here from this model. And we can even see it with other models as well. The further west you go, right, you can see we got some more reds, which means lower pressure, the stronger the tropical system is. So that's the other thing. If this tropical system ends up veering a little bit further towards the west, we're anticipating a stronger tropical system. If it veers off towards the east, we're anticipating a weaker tropical system. So that is the main thing here for us to watch out for. And I urge you guys to continue to pay attention to the National Hurricane Center because they will continuously update you guys on where they think the tropical system will go. Also, please be sure to pay attention to local emergency management. If they issue any sort of evacuations, please be sure to heed it and do not ride these storms. Other than that, thank you guys so much for watching. If you did like the video, please be sure to leave a like, subscribe if you're new, turn on notifications, share this with friends and family and on social media. Also, follow me on social media. Links will be in the description down below. I will see you guys tomorrow. I will have a video out for you guys again on Saturday night, so please be sure to stay tuned. Peace out, everyone.